Hey, Invigorate community. In this episode, we'll talk about a few of the various phases we've experienced with lupus and ways to navigate some of these challenges. I'm your co-host, Karin Wagner, along with my other co-host, Chris Burton. Chris, thanks for being here, as always. Yeah. So this is it's always an exciting time of year for us in the lupus community, being that it's Lupus Awareness Month. But I can't help but think back on just the years and how even engaged in Lupus Awareness Month differently over the past kind of 15 years. Like I used to be doing walks, and now I'm doing more work with You Got This Kid Leadership Foundation. And part of it that is just as evolved as my health journey has evolved. But as I think back through the phases, and from talking to other people, there seems to be a lot of like commonalities in kind of the seasons that we go through and experience with autoimmune diseases, not just lupus in general.
Life circumstances where there's so many different movements, right? The diagnosis, it can be such a life altering thing. Like, people didn't know that they could get this level of sick, right? And then you kind of have the whole, what I would call like existential crisis of like, well, what can I do now? Like, how am I going to live my life? And then getting used to that and hopefully getting to a place where you feel empowered enough to help other people and you're learning how to manage it every day. But it's always change. It's never a sense of really getting settled in and just saying like, this is what it is, because things are always changing. Even if things are really, really tough or really, really well managed, you're always adjusting. That's what I've really noticed about lupus and obviously the way it affects folks in the autoimmune community for sure.
Yeah, so even as we talk about kind of different stages that we go through, even within those stages, there's a lot of agency and empowerment in what you can do and what you can lean into with where you're at health wise and mentally
Yeah.
to really kind of improve and embrace your situation regardless of where you're at.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important to just always check in with yourself and not just get too disconnected from what's happening to you today and what are the trends that have been happening for the past few weeks and months. It's very in my experience, very easy to kind of get just locked into a sense of avoiding the facts or a sense of you know, using the lowest day as sort of the mark of where it always has to be, right? So if there's a day where you can't get out
Yeah.
of bed and walk around, you say, I can't walk around because, that day when things were at its worst, I couldn't walk around. So therefore I can't walk around. So you can't use your lowest point as a benchmark, and you can't use the sort of desire to avoid all of this as an excuse to hide from it either. You gotta take it on face on.
Yeah, that's so important, I think, through every phase of our autoimmune journey, but particularly early on when you start to notice that something doesn't feel right, or you start to have these weird kind of symptoms pop up. And to your point, it's like you can avoid it, or you
Right.
can until it makes you address it. But
That
the
part.
sooner you can start checking in with yourself and really starting to pay attention to what's going on,
Mhm.
that's the beginning of giving yourself agency to be able to get a diagnosis sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you think about how that whole journey toward the diagnosis is such a season of uncertainty. There's so much going on in the mix. And just thinking about what does it mean to really, really pay attention to yourself and to be kind to yourself. I think the way sometimes our grief shows up, the way that we deal with this at its core loss in our lives, um, it can almost be a sense of needing to have a reason for why this happened. So, we see that happen in general society, right? Something goes wrong, there's an accident, there's a tragedy. We say, oh, if this person had done their job, then, this would have been avoided. But what happens when it's just within ourselves, right? Like when the tragedy is confined to our own bodies, you know, sometimes we blame ourselves and say, look, if I hadn't done this, or maybe I shouldn't have slept so poorly, I should have exercised more, I exercised too much, right? I didn't eat the right foods, or whatever it is. There's a real core need to avoid all the sort of like self-loathing and really build up a rhythm of self-compassion, taking care of yourself while you're still trying to figure out exactly what's happening to you.
Yeah. And I think that's a critical point and something I struggled with a lot early on, especially when I started researching more about nutrition and some of the lifestyle changes that you can make to help yourself improve.
Right.
I remember specifically learning about the autoimmune protocol diet and being like, my gosh, I'm never going to be able to sustain that long term. And I had
Right.
so much guilt about not being able to follow it. But
Right.
you got to just like let that go and
Mhm.
let go of all the self-loathing, because these are seasons and it's like you said, it's continuously changing.
Yeah.
And the sooner you can build up that self-worth by focusing what you can do and the things you can control, your whole perspective starts to change.
No question. No question. Absolutely. So thinking about what you can control in this stage of pre-diagnosis, thinking about what can you do to make yourself more comfortable. I think about prior to knowing exactly what was going on, my feet would just hurt. Yeah, my feet would hurt so badly. And as a school teacher, I was always up on my feet. I was a basketball coach. I was playing basketball a lot. I loved to walk. So I was just doing a whole lot where I could feel how much my feet hurt. And it was really important for me to pay attention to, not wearing shoes that I thought were really like, fly, or just like, attention grabbing, or things that made me get a confidence boost because how much I love those sneakers. But really paying attention to how they felt and how they fit, and it's the ways in which those shoes could be a part of me taking care of my actual body. It was such a shift in thinking. Mind you, I was diagnosed in my early 20s, so the last thing I was thinking about was like, oh, comfortable shoes, right? Like I kind of was making fun of like, oh, this looks like grandpa shoes, something like that. But it really became more apparent to me how important comfortable shoes were.
Yeah, I could imagine you're probably getting at least 15, 20,000 steps in a
Oh,
day between all
crushing
that.
it. Crushing it, yes.
So even for me, when I was just, not even close to that, doing your standard 500 to 1,000
I love
steps,
it. I love it.
the shoes make a big difference. And I
Yeah.
remember looking online and being like, man, these are grandma shoes.
Come on.
But if you stick with it and keep looking, you can find brands that like are more comfortable and work.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
I'm with you. They make a big difference.
For sure. For sure. What did you when you were first dealing with this stage of pre-diagnosis, how did you deal with tough days? Like, were you someone who had access to like flexible work hours, or have a sleep mask while you took a nap during the day? Could you even take a nap during the day? Like, how did you deal with that aspect?
Man, I struggled. So it was a period of 3 months from when all of a sudden onset of intense joint pain. So thankfully I was an editor at a magazine at the
Yeah.
time. And so I had a desk job and I just sat and could type all day. However, just getting from the car to the desk to the coffee machine, I had no mobility. I mean, I slept, and you talk about being in your bed. Like, I went from my bed to the shower to the work to home, like, and
Come
didn't
on.
do anything. And I was even just talking to a young gal the other day who was telling me how she was taking naps under her desk every day at work
Come
just
on.
because the fatigue is so bad.
Right,
She's like,
right.
I know it's weird. I'm sure my coworkers think it's weird, but I got this thing going on, and this is what I have to do to get through the day. And thinking about that and the times where it's like I was just focused on getting from my car to my desk, it's like
Seriously.
you got to do just the bare minimum to get by and get through, and know that it'll get better, whether it's through medication or another form of treatment.
Yeah, yeah. You know what I love about that story is like I think about the times that we are more interested and concerned about like appearances than actually taking care of ourselves, right? Like it seems to look weird for a person to go under their desk and sleep. But what's worse, to be like the weird person or the person who's like fatigue is hurting them? You know, like that's I think we have to choose health over appearances. You know?
Well, and I'm sure that person is more productive after they
Oh
take their
yeah,
quick 20-minute nap under their desk versus trying to sip coffee or tea and just like keep your face from falling on the keyboard.
seriously, seriously, it's you know I think about how difficult it is to function if you're like exhausted like that. And we've talked in previous episodes about the difference between just being like sleepy and like having fatigue. It is so hard to do whatever your line of work is if you're having such severe fatigue because it's just like you don't have any juice to get any of the things done. And resting is the only way that your body can start to like refill what is just being consistently depleted.
And in those periods when you have no juice, I think any little thing that you can do to make it easier and simplify to
Mhm.
get through your day, and every little bit helps.
Yeah,
And if you're too fried to do it or feel like, oh, there's nothing left to change, like bring a friend, call a family member,
seriously,
someone who has more brain power and less brain fog than you do to
that's
help
fire.
think. Come and go through your daily routine and
Yeah,
figure out how you can change it to make it just a little bit easier.
come on, come on. And doing things like that help you to just remember to be thankful throughout all of this, right? Like it is no prize in just allowing the misery to just like fester and just become the way that we live our lives, so that we tell ourselves there are no good days because of what we're going through. No, I say this remembering being in the hospital bed and trying to find the victories in every little thing, right? So maybe I had to take this level of medicine and now it's been being decreased, or I had this learning thing in my labs, but now that's being decreased. Like all these different ways that we can celebrate something, even in the midst of awful, awful, difficult circumstances.
Chris, how do you make sure, and especially in those moments, did you stay on top of celebrating those small wins? Because I feel like if you just say it in your head and maybe this works for you, but sometimes it just doesn't stick, or I
Yeah,
don't do it consistently enough if I'm not really engaging in a writing practice or doing
yeah.
it very intentionally.
Well, for me, I would let gratitude be the first thing I would say in the morning. I made that a habit. But then even with just talk, I mean, if there's one thing, like although the hospital is lonely, you are not by yourself. you know, and any of us can attest. It is really hard to get a full night of sleep in the hospital, and somebody's coming in with some sort of thing. Maybe it's a medicine test, maybe it's labs. Something's going on. So you're not just sleeping in and by yourself the whole time. And so it's really about understanding gratitude as a disposition, as a way of being, as a mindset. And so as you're engaging with people, right? Like you're talking to the person who's bringing you the breakfast tray, or the person who's coming to, run these particular labs, or whoever it is, family member, a cousin, a friend, whoever's visiting, really think about how can you incorporate gratitude into the way that you speak in a way that doesn't pretend that this isn't really bad, right? Like I never, like, people sometimes will talk about toxic positivity. I wasn't trying to engage in anything like that. I wasn't avoiding how real and how awful it was. It was for me much more about saying, as bad as this is, and as like overwhelming as it is, this thing isn't the only thing going on. And this thing, as bad as it is, can't take me over 100% because there's so much more to me than what this thing can actually touch,
Yeah. It's like the gratitude is kind of the pathways or the ripple effect to just seeing the bigger picture, because it brings you outside of yourself.
No question.
It's like you're talking about the people who are bringing you food, or the lab technicians drawing your blood work. It's like they're all living their lives, and you're one of how many patients.
Right.
And there's a lot of people with a lot of struggles, but in those moments, whether it is just taking your medicine or getting out of bed, there's always opportunity to change and progress.
Yeah. I think understanding that there's always that opportunity gives you something to look forward to. I think it's really hard to do this and really push ourselves towards a place where our symptoms can actually improve if we don't see a sort of horizon of some sort. Yeah, I think we always, in my estimation, I think that like it's the human condition to need something to aspire toward, like to need some sort of goal that's ahead, not just talking about what you did or what you wanted to do but could never do, but like saying, I'm going to do this. I think that's something about who we are as a species, talking about human beings, that requires that.
And as we talk about pre-diagnosis and focusing on the day-to-day, I think all of us, or most of us, are striving for and yearning to get that diagnosis, that final decision, the answer, so then they can get on medication and get on their merry way.
Right.
But getting that diagnosis, well, it's an amazing feeling, and especially when the medication starts kicking in and you get some of that first relief, it doesn't end there. There's still a lot of progress and work, and there's always continued optimism. And I don't say that negatively. It's more because, to your point, as humans, we need to continuously be striving.
Right.
And whether we have an autoimmune disease or not, we should all be striving to improve our health.
Of course. Yeah, and I think that's it's really a tough message to hear in a world where people are saying things like, you're perfect just the way you are. And I think it's hard because it's like on levels, right? Like there are people who don't feel like they're ever appreciated. And so something like lupus or autoimmune disease makes them feel even more isolated. Like, people can't relate to what I'm going through. But just understanding that, this is something, it's a crisis. There's no doubt about it. But I also see such an opportunity in it, to make sure that you're forming community with like the hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people who have autoimmune diseases. I think there's such an opportunity for that. And it's just like the little ways that, you may not be able to do something. It's not that simple to say, I'm going to change this and it's going to get the problem gone. But it's about saying, if I focus on this thing, I know I can get a quality of life increase that I did not otherwise have. And almost turning into a game, not to make light of it, but like something that allows you to really say, oh, I can do this. So I did that last time. Let me see if I can do this. So I think we need that,
Yeah. It's got to be fun, because otherwise we're not going to want to do it.
Right. Right. For sure.
I think that's why a lot of the change behavior specialists are so adamant about incorporating words
Yes.
into, especially things that like you really struggle to get yourself to do, because then it adds that more motivation and carrot at the end of the stick and can get you to get moving, because it's not easy.
Not at all, not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. So just thinking about, and that's why I like, like tools like smartwatches, things that can help measure what you're doing, whether it be like exercise or you can sleep, right? So think about like what it looks like to be able to like sort of lock in and say, I'm gonna get this much sleep this week. And I was able to get, gosh, let's say you're getting like 7 hours, like what would it look like for me to get 8 or 8.5 hours, that would be something that could be really exciting.
Yeah. Well, and I know you've had a lot on your plate the last couple weeks, and you said sleep hasn't been gotten your 100% attention that it typically deserves or needs. But there are times where you know that you're kind of pushing your boundaries a little bit, but knowing that next week or coming soon, you're going to be able to kind of recover from pushing that.
Yeah.
And that wasn't always the case, but you've been living with this long enough that you're aware of when you're going to go over the edge, essentially.
For sure. Yeah, and it takes time to learn how to listen to your body. Like our body has a particular language, and I think it's only through the sort of prolonged suffering that chronic illness provides that you're able to really decipher the language and understand exactly what my body's saying. Because I know for me, I really am amazed when I think about the things that I now recognize as check engine lights that I push through all the time, right? So, when we're talking about the sleep deficit that I'm in after these last 2 weeks, like the way that I feel like, I've had this experience in the last couple weeks where I'm like, working on something or like trying to focus on something, and I kind of feel myself do this. So like almost like I feel my face like about to pull down. And I had that feeling so often in undergrad, and I just kept going. Versus now, like, I must be really tired. Let's step away from this and go do something else. I didn't feel like I had the latitude to do that prior to becoming a person that lives with chronic illness. I think now it's sort of a built-in reason for me to say to myself, I can't go too far. Versus prior, I just would go as far as like the gas can take me.
Yeah. And I think that time from when you're diagnosed and you're just excited to get back to your life, it can be easy to kind of push whichever disease you have aside and try and ignore it, to the time where it's like, okay, I really gotta make some changes.
Yeah.
So when you get to those points where you can't keep your head up or your eyes open, it's like, okay, what have I been doing that I've gotten to this point where I'm so exhausted I can't stay awake anymore?
Right.
And I think even just getting into the habit of doing that regularly, it makes it easier to kind of shape your day and kind of set your boundaries and figure out where your edges are so you don't overdo it.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, and really making sure that you're not treating that like an option because you have whatever external goal is more important. No, like you're not going to get to that goal. Or if you get to it, you're not going to be able to enjoy that goal.
Yeah.
If you're not taking care of the aforementioned.
Yeah. And if you're like me, and Chris, I know you've experienced this when maybe you've pushed yourself too far and ended up with a severe flare.
Yeah.
And I think in those, it just happens to the best of us, especially those of us with type A personalities that have a hard time slowing down. Right? But when that does happen, I think there's an opportunity in each one of these phases and during that time when you are forced to maybe be in bed or on the couch or laid up a little bit more often than you typically would. I think that is a perfect time to really think about your long-term goals. And because when you're pre-diagnosis and you're thinking about what can I do to get through this day, when you got extended periods of time laid up, you got time to figure out what can I do so that I can have a more sustainable lifestyle long term, so I don't end up back on this couch or in this bed.
It's really, it really requires almost like a full inventory of like all the things that you're doing, and so being willing to say, I am involved, this is hypothetical, but like I'm involved in these 6 different activities outside of my job. Which of these that like can I scale back? Like and it's not necessarily cutting something off, but let's say like you were the person who organized for the get-togethers, like you organized that. Could you move from organizing it to just showing up and like letting that be the way that you like? So now it becomes an outlet rather than another assignment. Could it be something like maybe you had to like coach the like baseball team or something? Could it be something where like you recruit someone to become the coach and you become the assistant coach? Could you recruit someone to coach and maybe you just go and just watch the game? Like there's ways that we can scale back without having to cut things off. And I want to lift that up too, because I think a lot of times we just think of it like I have to go cold turkey and all these things. These things are a part of us, so we can scale back.
Yeah. Don't sign up to be team manager because that's by far the most work.
So much work. So much work. Full-time volunteer. That's what you are.
I feel so sorry for every team manager on my kids' team.
We appreciate you. Can we say this from the Invigorate podcast? We appreciate you. Thank you for your service.
That's one of those situations where I'm like, hey, what can I do to help the team manager?
Come on, right.
I'll take over the snack list.
They need it, right, exactly. I'll go to Costco before the game or something.
For real. But even though, because it's like a lot of times, especially when we're in like kind of these really dire situations, don't have to completely overhaul it. But to your point, those small changes can make a big difference and you still get to participate. It's just not as intense as before.
That's it. And you're doing these things to, as I often put it when I was coming out of a player, you're doing these things to streamline your life,
Yeah.
We put so much energy out trying to juggle all these different things, and they're not even serving the same thing. So it's like every, the way my brain works, hopefully this translates for you all, is rather than putting things in a streamlined version where like all the different activities feed each other and they create some sort of ecosystem. Instead, you're doing a major part for you, but a minor part of several ecosystems. So you're unable to really see the change, or really unable to see the development, or even the point of being involved in all those things. It's ultimately just too taxing and not something that you can really sustain.
Yeah, so you're talking about kind of habit stacking and organizing your life so you can get the most energy out of yourself throughout each day.
Right. Yeah, it just really, it makes your life so much more efficient rather than just like the inefficiency of being involved in everything a little bit,
Mm-hmm. For sure. As we talk a lot about optimizing our life through these small steps, but especially as we've lived with these diseases long enough, and I think we're both in a phase where our health is relatively in good shape, our symptoms are mostly managed. I think in periods of this, I've never been so focused on my lifestyle than ever before.
Yeah.
But I think it's because now I have done a lot of streamlining, and I do feel better. And so I'm able to put more energy into it, able to cook more and do some things that just help everything. And to your point, it's all an ecosystem. So each one of those things just help everything.
Of course. And I think it's really important to remember that, perfect doesn't have to be the enemy of good. You can start with small, maybe unnoticeable to anyone else but yourself changes. Things that really, really get you into the habit of making good changes. Right? So kind of that sort of meta administrative work for yourself is that, this isn't the change, this is the change before the change. And understanding that, like, in order to get yourself in that habit of, perpetually evolving, always changing yourself, it takes the sort of like attention to detail with the small things that allow those things to stack and create good momentum.
Yeah, and I think by focusing on those small changes, the small steps, it helps remind me that this is a work in progress and this is a journey. And you can make it more of a fun game and compete with yourself about, how much you can improve. Because when I focus on just trying to get to this lofty goal of eating unprocessed foods 100% of the time, or working out 7 days a week, whatever it is, I just get overwhelmed and I tap out.
I understand. Because it's just too much, like you think about all that it takes to just sort of like, maintain those things while you have everything else going on. Like, part of the problem is that we don't feel like we have enough time. These things that you're talking about, is localizing this, like working out and eating, like eating whole foods really requires you to be someone who's like, I'm going to make my own food rather than just, grab something from a restaurant. It could be a restaurant that's certainly healthy, but still, the point remains. I think that, it really comes down to this sense that it's overwhelming feeling of like you don't have enough time.
Yeah. And I think in those instances, you just gotta stop and just look at, all right, what's on my plate today? What's on my to-do list? And then what's that one or two small things that I can change to either help myself health-wise or streamline so I can get more out of it.
Yeah. It's really, really critical to just look at the examples of folks, and there's so many resources available now. Whether you want to do the thing of like checking out what people's stories and journeys on social media, or you could really like follow along with folks that are doing in their books, their blogs, all these different ways that you can sort of, you don't have to reinvent this. You can be keeping up with what folks are doing in a way that allows you to build upon that and really customize it, modify it for your own journey. So maybe you start by doing this for like one meal a day, almost like what like Meatless Mondays look like, where you're customizing for the diet that you want to have. Or you start by saying, you know what, I'm gonna make sure that after dinner, I'm gonna take a walk. And maybe you're just like, I'm gonna walk for 5 minutes. And guess what? If you walk for 5 minutes every day after dinner, you've walked for 35 minutes that week, right? You walked for over half an hour. So allowing yourself to build good momentum and just continue to push yourself, push yourself, push yourself. That was something for me when I think about physical fitness. That was something that I prioritized. Was like, I'm not going to start off trying to like, compete with the people who are already like in like world class shape. I'm going to start off picking up the smallest weight in the gym, right? Like the 2.5 pounder, the 5 pounder, and just really get good form. And make sure I'm doing these exercises with really good form. Then build up to the 5 pound, the 10 pound, the 20 pound, the 30 pound. Like all these different things. This is how you get a chance to really amaze yourself by your progress, but it also allows you to say, look, I did this thing that felt impossible. What else feels impossible that I now can do? So that confidence in my experience spills over to other areas of your life.
Yeah. It's that consistent action that really builds that self-confidence and self-worth.
Yeah.
I remember, Yeah, you talking about building up. I had my second knee replacement done 2 or 3 years ago, and I remember just being so excited getting on the stationary bike for the first time and like being able to get my leg around fully.
Come on, right.
Yeah, so then I mean, and just gradually increasing. And now this year, my workout goal is to do 300 workouts. So averaging 6 days a week.
Right.
But it's more like I started out 3 years ago just trying to get my leg around the bike, and it's just been really fun to see the progression. So it doesn't matter if you're doing that many workouts or if you're just getting on the bike or going outside for 10 minutes. It's like just start wherever you're at.
Yeah. And the thing I love about this, Karin, is that it really feeds, the steps that we mentioned earlier. You doing this allows your gratitude to be fed. It allows your sense of accomplishment and confidence to be fed. You're doing the small stuff that ends up becoming like really big things. Like, it may feel really tough to work out that one time, and like it feels impossible to work out 6 times in a week. But if you get a rhythm with that, and you think about over a year, your goal is to do 300 workouts, how amazing will it feel to know, like, oh, like we're able to do, but also how deep will your compassion be for yourself when you're like listening to your body, and those days you're like, I have a goal, I have to get out there and work out. You're like, well, I can't do the all out thing, but I'm going to go out there and try to do something, and just giving yourself that grace to understand that something is always better than done.
Yeah. There's definitely days where I'm not doing the HIIT workouts. I'm sticking more to the gentle yoga and mobility.
That's it. Come through with the Pilates, I see you. Yeah.
Heck yeah, totally. You need a day or two of that. Switch it up.
Of course.
But when you're talking about building confidence and coming a long way, that's one example. So, but I know that if I get into a situation where, man, it's a tough health situation, I've already come back from hard times. I've already been able to stick with it and build it and continue to progress. So it's like there's no reason I wouldn't be able to do it again. And just knowing that gives you a sense of kind of self-assurance throughout the process.
I'm with that. And that's what I think is really, really important, is just to remember that, perseverance. Understand we do this in the moments, build up to really tell the whole story. I think when we do that, when we can be that kind of aware and gracious towards ourselves, that's how we survive this thing. That's how we turn our surviving into thriving.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the coolest, most incredible things about lupus and these autoimmune diseases. Despite it could be negative that they're chronic and indefinite, it has built a strength and perseverance in me that I don't know that I would have gained had I not gone through this.
Yeah, sure. I learned a new slang term over the weekend. It's new to me. It's not new, but it's called, people in California say whooping feet. Like if somebody gets really beat up that bad, it's like, or if a person's beating up somebody else bad, they're whooping feet. And I feel like there's times in my life where lupus was also whooping feet, and I feel like it's okay for us to acknowledge that. It's like, man, it was rough out here.
That just gives me some funny visuals. I just like picture a mad duck.
Yeah, serious, aggressive.
I don't know.
Aggressive duck. I'm here for it.
He's upset.
Yeah, very upset. Very upset.
So, Grace, last question in honor of Lupus Awareness Month. Is there anything you would like people to know about lupus or autoimmune diseases in general?
Yeah, I think number one, you don't have to do them by yourselves. I want to just to a shameless but also helpful plug for a lupus support group we have going on. Actually, by the time this airs, it'll be coming up on the following Wednesday. We do third Wednesday of every month, 8 o'clock East Coast time, 5 o'clock West Coast time. This talking about it's called Lupus Warrior Well support group, and we're just really trying to encourage other lupus survivors along their journey. So with it being the whole month of May, Lupus Awareness Month, we're going to be talking about ways to encourage each other, reflecting on our own stories of lupus, and also sharing resources. So if that's something that you can benefit from, yeah, let's come on through, and I'll send the info to Karin so we can have it in the episode info too. So there it is.
Yeah, so did you mention, do they need to sign up for it?
Yeah, there's a registration link. So I can send the registration link to you.
Awesome. We'll drop it in the show notes. That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Cool. Chris, thank you for being here as always. Appreciate it.
Well, no, it's always a joy to be here, for sure.
Yeah, for everyone in the community, thanks for listening, and please like and share this episode so we can reach more people with autoimmune diseases and help them out. So thank you very much, and take care.
Take care, y'all.